The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but Alex Reed kept drinking it anyway. Bad habits die hard when you spend most of your time in the empty space between stars. The patrol ship Honey Badger hummed quietly around him as it drifted through the outer rim territories, carrying supplies to forgotten colonies that bigger ships never bothered to visit. Reed scratched his stubbled chin and checked the navigation display again. 3 more stops before they could head back to base. Not exactly the glamorous career he had imagined when he joined the Space Service 15 years ago. Back then, he thought he would be exploring new worlds and meeting alien civilizations. Instead, he spent his days delivering medicine and spare parts to farmers who had moved so far from civilization that even pirates ignored them. His communication officer, Rita Stone, looked up from her console with a frown. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange on the long-range sensors. Multiple ships moving fast toward the Arcturus system." Reed set down his coffee cup and walked over to her station. The display showed dozens of red dots moving in perfect formation, too perfect for merchants or colonists. "How many ships are we talking about?" "At least 40 contacts, sir. Maybe more. They're still too far away to get exact numbers, but they're definitely military vessels based on their formation pattern." The blood in Reed's veins turned to ice water. Arcturus Prime housed one of the newer human colonies, a peaceful settlement called New Haven, where 20,000 people grew food and studied the local ecosystem. They had no military defenses beyond some basic planetary shields meant to stop asteroids and solar storms. "Are you sure about those numbers, Rita?" She nodded grimly. "I've run the scan 3 times. 47 ships all moving toward Arcturus Prime at maximum speed. Based on their engine signatures, I think they're Dominion vessels." Reed felt his stomach drop. The Dominion Empire had been expanding aggressively for the past 5 years, swallowing up smaller civilizations and enslaving their populations. Human colonies in the Outer Rim had been lucky so far, mostly because they were too small and remote to be worth the trouble. But New Haven had been growing rapidly, and its agricultural exports were starting to attract attention from traders across the sector. How long until they reached the colony? At their current speed, maybe 6 hours. Reed did some quick calculations in his head. The nearest Galactic Defense Force fleet was stationed 3 systems away. Even if they left immediately, it would take them at least 2 weeks to reach Arcturus Prime. By then, New Haven would be nothing but smoking ruins. Tom Bailey, the ship's engineer, emerged from the engine room wiping grease off his hands. "Captain, I heard the conversation over the comm system. What are our orders?" Reed looked around at his crew. 6 people total, counting himself. The Honey Badger was an old patrol vessel that had been scheduled for retirement 5 years ago, but budget cuts had kept her in service. Her weapons were outdated, her armor was thin, and her top speed was slower than most modern freighters. Against 47 Dominion warships, they would last about 30 seconds in a direct fight. The smart thing to do was contact Galactic. Command and report the situation. Let the politicians and admirals figure out how to respond. Reed had a family back on Earth, a small apartment overlooking the Pacific Ocean that he visited twice a year when he got leave. He could go home, file his report, and forget about the 20,000 people who were about to die on a planet he had never visited. But he had never been accused of being smart. Phil, set course for Arcturus Prime. Maximum speed. Navigator. Phil Barnes looked up from his charts with surprise. "Sir? Did you mean to say set course for the nearest defense station?" "I said Arcturus Prime, and I meant it." Rita turned in her chair to face him. "Captain, with all due respect, we can't fight 47 Dominion warships. It would be suicide." Reed walked back to his command chair and sat down heavily. "Maybe we can't win a fight, but we might be able to buy some time. Help with evacuation efforts, provide covering fire while civilian transports escape the system." "What, civilian transports?" Tom asked quietly. "New Haven doesn't have any ships big enough for a large-scale evacuation. Most of their vessels are just short-range shuttles for moving between the colony and the orbital farming stations." The truth hung in the air like a toxic cloud. There would be no evacuation, no last-minute rescue by the cavalry. 20,000 human beings were going to die, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. except maybe there was something they could do. Reed activated the ship's intercom system. "Attention all hands, this is the captain. I'm not going to lie to you about our situation. We're heading into a fight that we probably can't win against an enemy that outnumbers us 47-1. Anyone who wants to transfer to an escape pod and wait for pickup has my permission to do so. No questions asked, no black marks on your record." He paused, looking at each member of his crew. They were good people who had signed up to patrol, empty space and deliver supplies, not to die in hopeless battles against impossible odds. "But if you stay, we're going to do everything we can to protect those colonists. We might not be able to save them all, but we're going to make the Dominion pay for every life they take." Silence filled the bridge for a long moment. Then Rita turned back to her console and began running diagnostic checks on the weapon systems. Tom disappeared back into the engine room, muttering about power distribution and structural integrity. Phil plotted their course to Arcturus Prime and engaged the faster-than-light drive. Nobody mentioned the escape pods. Reed felt a mix of pride and terror as the Honey Badger jumped to hyperspace. Pride because his crew had chosen to follow him into certain death rather than abandon innocent people. Terror because he had no idea how 6 people in an obsolete patrol ship could possibly make a difference against the might of the Dominion Empire. But Honey Badgers had never been known for backing down from a fight no matter how big their opponent was. Maybe it was time to live up to their ship's name. Space around Arcturus Prime looked like a mechanical storm had frozen in place. Massive Dominion warships hung motionless in perfect formation, their dark hulls bristling with weapon systems that could crack a planet's crust. Each vessel was 10 times larger than the Honey Badger, and there were 47 of them surrounding the helpless human colony below. Reed studied the tactical display with growing despair. The Dominion fleet had positioned themselves in overlapping defensive patterns that covered every possible escape route from the planet. New Haven's planetary shields flickered weakly under the constant bombardment of probe lasers as the enemy tested their defenses. It was like watching a cat play with a wounded mouse. "Defensive capabilities of the colony?" he asked quietly. Rita's fingers danced across her sensor controls. "Minimal, sir. Standard deflector shields designed for asteroid impacts and solar radiation. Maybe 6 hours of protection against sustained military-grade weapons fire. Probably less. Any sign of evacuation efforts?" "Negative. All civilian vessels are grounded. The colonists appear to be sheltering in underground facilities, but those won't help much when the Dominion starts dropping planetary bombardment charges." Reed felt the familiar weight of impossible decisions settling on his shoulders. Every instinct told him to retreat, call for backup, and hope that someone with more ships and better weapons could arrive in time to help. But he had seen Dominion tactics before. They would reduce New Haven to ash and radioactive debris within hours of beginning their assault, then strip mine the planet for resources before moving on to their next target. "Tom, what's our current status?" The engineer's voice crackled through the intercom from the engine room. "All systems running at peak efficiency, Captain. Weapons are charged, shields are up, and I've managed to squeeze an extra 15% power out of the main engines by bypassing some safety protocols. We're as ready as we're ever going to be." Reed nodded and activated the tactical plotting system. The holographic display showed the Dominion fleet from multiple angles, highlighting weak points in their formation and possible attack vectors. Not that it mattered much when every single enemy ship could destroy them with a few well-placed shots. "Phil, I need you to plot a course that takes us through the asteroid field on the edge of the system. Fast and unpredictable, using the rocks as cover." "Sir, that's going to put a lot of stress on the hull. Those asteroids are moving at different velocities and some of them are pretty big. Better to risk a collision than get vaporized by Dominion plasma cannons." Reed studied the enemy formation again, looking for patterns and weaknesses. The Dominion were methodical fighters who relied on overwhelming firepower and coordinated tactics. They were used to facing enemies who fought conventionally, standing in neat lines and exchanging volleys until one side retreated or died. But the Honey Badger was too small and fast to fight conventionally. "Rita, I want you to target their communication relays and sensor arrays. Not their main weapons or engines, just the systems they use to coordinate with each other." She looked puzzled. "Sir, That's not going to do much damage to their overall combat capability. It's not supposed to. We can't destroy 47 warships, but maybe we can confuse them enough to disrupt their attack on the colony. Understanding dawned on her face. You want to break up their formation by making it harder for them to coordinate their movements. Exactly. A fleet that size needs constant communication to maintain their defensive positions. If we can create enough chaos in their command structure, they might have to delay their assault while they reorganize. Tom's voice came through the intercom again. Captain, I'm reading massive energy buildups from several enemy ships. Looks like they're preparing to begin the bombardment of New Haven. Reed felt his heart rate spike. All hands, battle stations. We're going in. The Honey Badger dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the asteroid field, her engines screaming as Phil threw the ship into a wild corkscrew pattern between the floating rocks. Dominion sensors immediately detected their arrival, but the small patrol vessel was already moving too fast for their heavy weapons to track effectively. Reed watched the tactical display as red targeting indicators swept back and forth, trying to lock onto their position. The asteroids provided some cover, but it was temporary at best. Once they cleared the field, they would be exposed to the full firepower of the enemy fleet. First target coming up, Rita announced. Dominion cruiser, port side of their formation. I have a clear shot at their primary communication array. Take it. The Honey Badger's main weapon, a modified plasma cannon designed for disabling pirates and smugglers, fired a brilliant blue bolt that lanced across space and struck the Dominion vessel's hull. The enemy ship's communication tower exploded in a shower of sparks and metal fragments. Immediately, the Dominion formation began to shift as neighboring ships tried to compensate for the loss of coordination. The Honey Badger was already moving, diving toward another target before the enemy gunners could respond. Second target coming up fast, Phil called out as he threw the ship into a sharp banking turn that made Reed's stomach lurch. Another plasma bolt, another destroyed sensor array. The Dominion fleet was starting to look less like a coordinated military formation and more like a confused mob of angry hornets. But they were still 47 very large, very dangerous hornets. Captain, multiple enemy vessels are breaking. Formation to pursue us, Rita warned. 6 ships moving to intercept. Reed gritted his teeth as weapons fire began filling the space around them. Massive plasma bolts and particle beams crisscrossed their path, each one capable of vaporizing the Honey Badger instantly if it connected. Phil's piloting skills were all that kept them alive as he wove between the deadly energy streams. Tom, I need everything you can give me from the engines. You've got it, Captain, but I can't maintain this power level for more than a few hours. The reactor is already running above safe limits. They cleared the asteroid field and found themselves in open space surrounded by Dominion warships that were beginning to recover from the initial confusion. The enemy was adapting to their hit-and-run tactics, positioning faster escort vessels to intercept while their heavy cruisers maintained the blockade around New Haven. But they had bought the colony a few extra hours. Maybe that would be enough for a miracle to happen. Reed knew better than to count on miracles, but he was fresh out of other options. The Honey Badger limped through space with smoke trailing from her port engine housing and a crack running along her main hull. 3 hours of hit-and-run attacks had taken their toll on both the ship and her crew. Reed wiped blood from a cut above his left eye while studying the tactical situation that grew worse by the minute. They had managed to disable communication systems on 12 Dominion vessels and destroy the sensor arrays on 8 more, but the enemy was learning. Fast escort ships now patrolled in pairs, covering each other's blind spots and forcing the Honey Badger to take increasingly dangerous risks to reach her targets. Worse, the Dominion commander had adapted by switching to backup communication channels and tightening his formation. Hull breach on Deck 3 has been sealed, Tom reported from the damage control station he had set up on the bridge. But we're down to 60% structural integrity, and the port engine is running on borrowed time. One more direct hit, and we're space dust. Reed nodded grimly. Through the main view screen, he could see New Haven's planetary shields flickering more rapidly as the Dominion intensified their probing attacks. The colony had maybe 2 hours left before the shields collapsed completely. Rita looked up from her sensor display with exhaustion written across her face. Captain, I'm detecting massive energy buildups from the enemy flagship. The Devastator is charging her main weapons. The Dominion flagship sat in the center of their formation like a mechanical mountain, bristling with enough firepower to sterilize an entire continent. 6 heavy cruisers surrounded the massive vessel in a protective shell that made it almost impossible to approach. Once that flagship opens fire, the colony is finished, Phil said quietly. Those are planetary bombardment weapons. They'll punch right through New Haven's shields like they're made of paper. Reed stared at the Devastator and felt the weight of 20,000 lives pressing down on him. His crew had followed him into this hopeless fight without question, trusting his judgment even when that judgment led them towards certain death. They deserved better than to watch helplessly while innocent people were slaughtered. Tom, how much power can you divert from life support and other non-essential systems? The engineer's eyes widened with understanding. You're thinking about a ramming run, aren't you, sir? It's the only way to stop that flagship before it destroys the colony. If we can punch through their escort screen and hit the Devastator at maximum velocity, we might be able to cripple her main weapons. Rita turned in her chair to face him. Captain, that's a suicide mission. Even if we somehow manage to reach the flagship, the impact will destroy us both. Reed met her gaze steadily. 20,000 people, Rita. Men, women, children who never did anything worse than try to build a better life on a distant world. They're counting on us. Silence filled the bridge as his crew absorbed the implications of what he was proposing. They had all known this moment would come eventually, when the impossible odds finally caught up with them and there was nowhere left to run. Tom was the first to speak. If we're doing this, I can reroute all available power to the engines and structural integrity fields. It won't be enough to survive the impact, but it might get us through their defensive fire. I can plot a course that uses the orbital debris from their earlier attacks as cover, Phil added. Make it harder for their gunners to target us during the approach. Rita nodded slowly. I'll transfer all weapon power to the forward shields. Give us the best chance of reaching the target. Reed felt a surge of pride mixed with overwhelming sadness. These people had become more than just his crew over the years they had served together. They were his family, and he was leading them to their deaths. But before he could give the order to begin their final attack run, Phil's sensor board lit up with new contacts. Captain, I'm reading multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Civilian vessels, looks like a mix of freighters and passenger transports. Reed frowned at the tactical display as dozens of new contacts appeared on the screen. The ships were clearly non-military, with the hodgepodge appearance of independent merchants and traders. But what were they doing here? This is Captain Nora Kim of the trading vessel Starwind. A woman's voice crackled through the communication system. We've been monitoring your fight through subspace communication networks. The whole galaxy is watching. The whole galaxy was watching. Reed felt a chill run down his spine as he realized what that meant. Their desperate battle with the Dominion fleet was being broadcast across space, transmitted from ship to ship through the informal communication networks that connected traders and merchants across known space. Captain Reed! Another voice joined the channel, this one belonging to an alien species with a translator giving it a mechanical tone. I am Trader Voss of the Cargo Hauler Profit Margin. Your actions have impressed many of us. A small ship, fighting impossible odds to protect innocence is a story that resonates across all cultures. More voices joined the conversation as trading captains from a dozen different species offered their support. Most were just words of encouragement, but some were offering something more valuable. Reed, this is Captain Martinez of the ore freighter, heavy lifter. I've got mining charges in my cargo hold and industrial cutting lasers. They're not military weapons, but they might be able to help even the odds a little. Reed stared at the sensor display in amazement. 23 civilian vessels had arrived in the system, their captains willing to risk their lives and their ships to help complete strangers. The Dominion had expected to find a helpless human colony defended by a single obsolete patrol ship. Instead, they were facing an impromptu alliance of merchant vessels from across the galaxy. This is Commander Thak Morvac of the Dominion fleet. A harsh voice cut through the chatter. All civilian vessels will leave this system immediately, or be destroyed. We will not tolerate interference in our military operations. Captain Kim's voice came back strong and clear. This is Nora Kim responding to Commander Morvac. We're not interfering in your military operations. We're defending innocent civilians from an unprovoked attack. There's a difference. Reed felt something he hadn't experienced in hours. Hope. The odds were still terrible, but they were no longer impossible. 24 ships against 47 was better than 1 against 47. All civilian vessels. This is Captain Reed of the Honey Badger. If you're serious about helping, I need you to spread out and target the Dominion communication systems. Disrupt their coordination and we might have a chance. Understood, Reed, Captain Kim replied. All trading vessels, you heard the man. Let's show these Dominion bullies what happens when they mess with innocent people. The tide of battle was about to turn, and Reed couldn't help but smile as he watched civilian freighters and passenger ships move into attack positions. The galaxy was indeed watching, and it had decided which side it wanted to win. Commander Thak Morvac studied the tactical display aboard the Devastator with growing frustration. What should have been a simple planetary conquest had turned into a public relations nightmare broadcast across the galaxy. His communications officer had informed him that over 200 different news networks were now carrying live feeds of the battle, transmitted by the growing number of civilian vessels gathering at the system's edge. The small human patrol ship continued to dart between his cruisers like an angry insect, somehow avoiding destruction despite being outnumbered and outgunned by impossible odds. Worse, it had inspired nearly 24 civilian vessels to join the fight, turning a military operation into something that resembled a popular uprising. Sir, the merchant vessels are moving into attack formation, reported his tactical officer. Should we engage them? Morvac clenched his jaw. Destroying civilian ships would be well within his legal rights as a military commander, but it would also provide his enemies with powerful propaganda footage. The last thing the Dominion Empire needed was images of their warships vaporizing defenseless freighters and passenger transports. Hold fire on the civilian vessels unless they directly threaten our ships, he ordered, but maintain targeting locks. I want them to know we can destroy them at any moment. On the main screen, he watched the Honey Badger lead a coordinated attack on one of his destroyer squadrons. The patrol ship's weapons fire was joined by industrial mining lasers from 3 different freighters, overwhelming the destroyer's shields and forcing it to withdraw from formation. Commander, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Starwind. The captain wants to speak with you directly. Morvac considered ignoring the call, but curiosity got the better of him. Put it through. The face of Captain Nora Kim appeared on his screen, a middle-aged woman with steel-gray eyes and a determined expression. Behind her, he could see the busy bridge of a working cargo vessel, nothing like the sterile military precision of his own flagship. Commander Morvac, I'm Captain Kim. I wanted to give you one chance to withdraw your fleet peacefully before this situation gets out of hand. Morvac almost laughed. Captain Kim, you are commanding a civilian freighter against 47 military vessels. I hardly think you're in a position to make demands. Maybe not, Kim acknowledged, but you might want to check your subspace communication logs. This battle is being watched by billions of beings across known space. Your reputation, and the reputation of your entire empire, is being decided right now by how you handle this situation. The truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. Military victories were temporary, but reputations could last for centuries. If he was seen as the commander who slaughtered civilians to conquer a peaceful farming colony, it would haunt both him and the Dominion Empire for generations. What are you proposing, Captain Kim? Simple. Withdraw your fleet and leave this system. The colonists have done nothing to threaten your empire. They just want to live in peace and grow food for their families. The Dominion does not retreat from inferior forces, Morvac said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Then you're going to have to explain to your superiors why you needed 47 warships to defeat 24 civilian freighters and 1 obsolete patrol vessel. Before Morvac could respond, his tactical officer spoke up urgently. Sir, multiple hyperspace signatures detected, large vessels, approaching fast. The tactical display updated to show 6 massive ships dropping out of hyperspace at the system's edge. Morvac's blood turned cold as he recognized the distinctive hull configurations. Galactic Defense Force heavy cruisers, each one larger than his flagship and equipped with the most advanced weapons technology in known space. "This is Admiral A. Patricia Hayes of the GDF 3rd Fleet," a crisp voice announced over all communication channels. "All vessels in this system will power down their weapons and prepare to be boarded for inspection." Morvac felt the walls closing in around him. The arrival of the GDF fleet meant that the galactic authorities had decided to intervene directly. Fighting them would mean war with the entire Galactic Council, something even the powerful Dominion Empire was not ready to contemplate. But he still had one card left to play. "Admiral Hayes, this is Commander Morvac. The Dominion Empire is conducting legitimate military operations in this system under our sovereign right of expansion. We do not recognize GDF authority over our internal affairs. Commander, your legitimate military operations appear to involve threatening civilians who have committed no crime, except living on a planet you want to steal. That makes it very much a GDF matter." Reed's voice cut into the conversation from the Honey Badger. "Admiral Hayes, this is Captain Alex Reed. The Dominion fleet has been preparing to bombard New Haven Colony for the past 6 hours. 20,000 innocent people are in immediate danger." Morvac realized that his tactical position had become impossible. The GDF fleet could easily defeat his forces in open battle, and now he was facing accusations of planning war crimes against civilian populations. His career and possibly his life hung in the balance. In desperation, he made a decision that would haunt him forever. "All Dominion vessels, this is Commander Morvac. Target the planetary population centers immediately. If we cannot have this world, then no one can." The bridge of the Devastator fell silent as his officers stared at him in shock. Deliberately targeting civilian populations was forbidden by every military code in known space, a war crime that would make him an outlaw in the eyes of the entire galaxy. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "are you sure about this order?" "I said target the population centers. Do it now." But even as his ships began charging their planetary bombardment weapons, Morvac knew he had made a fatal mistake. The galaxy was indeed watching, and they would remember this moment forever. He had just transformed himself from a military commander into a war criminal, and there would be no coming back from that. Captain Reed's voice crackled across the communication channels one final time. "All ships, this is the Honey Badger. The Dominion is targeting civilians. We cannot let that happen." 24 civilian vessels and 6 GDF cruisers responded as one, their weapons powering up simultaneously. Commander Morvac had finally succeeded in uniting the galaxy against him, but not in the way he had intended. The space around Arcturus Prime erupted into chaos as 30 different vessels opened fire simultaneously on the Dominion fleet. Energy beams crisscrossed the darkness between stars while missile trails drew bright lines across the void. What had begun as a one-sided massacre had transformed into the largest space battle in recent galactic history. Reed guided the Honey Badger through the maelstrom of weapons fire with grim determination. The enemy flagship Devastator was still charging. Its planetary bombardment weapons, and every second that passed brought New Haven closer to destruction. Around him, the improvised alliance of civilian vessels and GDF cruisers pressed their attack with desperate fury. "Captain Kim is making her run on the enemy flagship," Rita reported from her sensor station. "She's taking heavy fire from the escort cruisers." Reed watched on his tactical display as the merchant vessel Starwind pushed through a wall of plasma bolts and particle beams, her industrial hull plating glowing cherry red from multiple impacts. Captain Kim had volunteered to lead the assault on the Devastator while the Honey Badger provided covering fire. "Phil, bring us around to support the Starwind. Tom, give me everything the engines can handle." The battered patrol ship accelerated toward the center of the Dominion formation, her weapons blazing as she targeted the escort vessels surrounding the enemy flagship. One by one, the protective screen of cruisers began to fall back under the combined assault of the Allied fleet. But it might not be enough. "Energy readings from the Devastator are off the charts," Rita warned. "They're preparing to fire in less than 60 seconds. Reed felt time slowing down as he watched the massive enemy vessel rotate to bring its main weapons to bear on the planet below. 20,000 innocent people were about to die because he had failed to stop the Dominion fleet in time. Then Captain Kim's voice crackled through the communication system. "Reed, I can't get close enough to stop them. My ship is too damaged." Without hesitation, Reed made his decision. "All power to forward shields and structural integrity. We're going in." The honey badger shot forward like a bullet fired from the hand of an angry god, her engines screaming as they pushed the ship beyond her design limits. Dominion weapons fire converged on the small vessel from every direction, but somehow she continued flying through the deadly barrage. 30 seconds to impact, Phil announced, his voice steady despite the fact that they were all about to die. 20 seconds. Reed looked around at his crew one final time. These people had followed him into the impossible and never wavered in their courage. If they had to die, at least they would die protecting innocent lives. 10 seconds. The Devastator's massive hull filled their view screen, growing larger by the moment. Reed could see Dominion crew members running through corridors inside the enemy ship, their faces visible through transparent sections of the hull. 5 seconds. But then something unexpected happened. The Devastator's main weapons suddenly powered down, their energy readings dropping to 0 in a matter of moments. "What the hell?" Reed muttered as he pulled the honey badger out of her collision course at the last possible second. Admiral Hayes's voice provided the answer. "This is Admiral Hayes to all vessels. Commander Morvac has surrendered. The Dominion fleet is standing down." Reed slumped back in his command chair as the realization hit him. They had won. Against impossible odds, a single patrol ship and 24 civilian vessels had defeated one of the most powerful military fleets in known space. The aftermath unfolded quickly. Dominion ships powered down their weapons and prepared to be escorted out of the system by the GDF fleet. Commander Morvac was taken into custody to face war crimes charges for ordering attacks on civilian populations. The threat to New Haven was over, but the real impact of the battle would be felt for years to come. News of the honey badger's impossible stand spread across the galaxy within days, carried by the same informal communication networks that had brought the civilian fleet to Arcturus Prime. The story of a small human patrol ship that refused to abandon innocent colonists captured the imagination of billions of beings across hundreds of different worlds. Reed found himself transformed, from an obscure patrol captain into a galactic celebrity, much to his discomfort. Politicians wanted to give him medals, news reporters wanted to interview him, and military academies wanted to study his tactics. He turned down most of the attention, preferring to return to his regular duties of delivering supplies to remote colonies. The honey badger herself became a symbol of courage and determination. When she was finally retired from active service 3 years later, the ship was placed in the Galactic Museum of Military History, where millions of visitors came to see the vessel that had changed the course of interstellar politics. More importantly, the Battle of Arcturus Prime established new precedents for galactic mutual defense. The Galactic Council passed the Civilian Protection Act, which required all member species to respond to threats against innocent populations, regardless of political boundaries. Never again would colonies like New Haven face destruction alone. The civilian captains who had joined the fight were honored as heroes across their respective worlds. Captain Nora Kim retired from trading to become the first director of the Galactic Merchant Defense League, an organization dedicated to protecting civilian vessels and colonies from military aggression. Reed continued his patrol duties for another 5 years before accepting promotion to admiral in command of the newly formed Rapid Response Fleet. His first order of business was to commission a new class of fast patrol vessels, all named after small but fierce Earth animals. The Wolverine, the Mongoose, and the Tasmanian Devil joined dozens of other ships designed to respond quickly to threats against civilian populations. But perhaps the most lasting legacy of the battle was something intangible. Across the galaxy, beings from hundreds of different species began to tell stories about the small human ship that refused to back down from impossible odds. Children grew up hearing about Captain Reed and his crew, learning that sometimes the right thing to do was also the hardest thing to do. The Dominion Empire never recovered from the public relations disaster of Arcturus Prime. Within a decade, Their aggressive expansion had stalled as other civilizations united to contain their territorial ambitions. The empire that had once seemed unstoppable crumbled under the weight of its own brutality and the galaxy's determination to prevent another such threat. Years later, when Reed was an old man with gray hair and a chest full of medals, he rarely. War reporters would still ask him about that day when 6 people in an obsolete patrol ship had changed the course of galactic history. His answer was always the same. We didn't set out to be heroes. We just did what anybody would do when innocent. People needed help. Sometimes that's all it takes to change the world.